Reach it up, my selector.
Due to some violent content, parental discretion is advised.
I know you're gonna dig this.
Well, you can see you're live with Mr. Joe Habib from Ringside Reporter Live. He's in the house. And you're also joined today by me, Maestro, from Maestro A Boxing. Joe and me, we do a show called Sucker Punch, usually Tuesdays, 8 p.m. Eastern on my channel. But we figured it would be fun to do it every now and again on Ringside Reporter Live. And get into the nitty-gritty of things that are not just boxing, but that also cross the lines into other interesting topics that are widely discussed and sometimes not so widely as it relates to current affairs. And today, Joe and me, we want to get into this whole Dillian Whyte, Tyson Fury situation, 80-20 split. Is it fair? Is it exploitation? And also talk about some other things that are interesting to us as well. You know, and we're going to get into those topics too. I want to talk a little bit about Omicron and about the virus, Corona that is, and COVID-19, and also want to get Joe's opinion on something I talked about today on my channel, the Jake Paul UFC back and forth, namely Dana White. Joe, what's cooking, fam?
What's going on, brother? How you doing?
Good. Very good. Glad to be here on Ringside Reporter Live, and we've got people here with us. Luis Reyes is in the house. Team Batman Boxing is with us as well. Big shout out to the people joining us live. Joe, look, I got to get right into it. Topic of discussion. Dillian Whyte, 80-20 split. Matter of fact, it's the 20% that has people really up in arms. I'm going to play a video real quick. You know, it's a guy that I watch quite regularly, actually. His name is Ade Oladipo. He's out there in London. He actually works for DAZN at times. You'll catch him on the UK broadcast specifically, doing commentary out there. He wasn't too pleased when the WBC made big news last week and announced 80-20 would be the split, and that this fight is going to purse bid on January the 11th, which is right around the corner, actually. You know, we're going to get right into that. I'm just going to pull up the audio, Joe, and then I'm going to ask you for your opinion on it all. Let's have a listen. This is Ade Oladipo talking about the situation with Whyte and Fury?
Yeah, but what does Dillian Whyte bring to the table? He's not a draw. Look at his pay-per-view numbers. That doesn't matter. That does not matter. Dillian Whyte, whether you like him or not, or agree that he's not a big B-side or whatever, Dillian Whyte is the WBC interim champion. Now, according to the WBC's own rules, that's a 55-45 split. Now, some of you might say, oh, but he might be mandatory. Even if he's a mandatory, it's a 70-30 split according to the WBC's own rules. How can a promoter go to the WBC and say, you know what, now let's make this 80-20, and WBC, yeah, sure. How can that happen? How is that allowed? That's some big bullshit. I'm sorry, it is. So again, take your allegiance to Tyson Fury away. Take the fact that you might think Dillian Whyte's not a draw away. You can't have rules and then a promoter go to the sanctioning bodies and those rules then change. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And if I'm Dillian Whyte, you fight this. Some people might say, and look, I'm guilty of it, hands up. I made a video a couple of days ago saying, look, I hope Dillian Whyte doesn't price himself out of a fight with Tyson Fury. I take that back. Go and get what you're worth. Go and get what's in the rules. Go and get it. Get your 55-45 split. The top rank can't go to the WBC and all of a sudden WBC say, okay, we'll accept an 80-20 split. No. I think it's a fucking disgrace. And only in boxing. By the way, only in boxing. Hence why I say it needs a world governing body. Think of this happening in any other sport. Look, football. We all watch a bit of football. What's the biggest tournament in the world? World Cup. Who is the biggest team in the world? Brazil. Imagine Brazil were playing, this is so random, but I'm going to go random for you, so hopefully I can make my point a bit clearer. Imagine Brazil were playing New Zealand in the final. By the way, the winner of the World Cup gets 35 million pounds or something there or thereabouts. Obviously, look, you make a lot more for endorsements and stuff like that, but the winner of the World Cup gets 35 million. I think the loser gets around 15, 20. But you're going to understand the point I'm making. Brazil are massive. 99% of the people watching it are watching it for Brazil. No disrespect to New Zealand, right? But 99% are going to watch it for Brazil. Imagine the head of Brazilian FA going to FIFA and saying, look, come on, it's New Zealand. It's not fucking Argentina or England. This is New Zealand. They're all watching this final because of us. What we should do, let's give New Zealand 2 million. We'll take the rest. They'll be happy with it. You know why? Because no one's tuning in for New Zealand anyway. You can't do that. I'm sorry, New Zealand have got there. They've made their way there. They'll get their split regardless. They're gonna get regardless what they deserve to get there. Now, say what you want about how Dillian Whyte's got there. He's there. Dillian Whyte's put himself in an interim or a mandatory situation. The splits are there. It's written in black and white, 70-30 mandatory, 55-45 interim. But yet all of a sudden, Top Rank is saying, no, let's make this an 80-20 split because what? Because Tyson Fury is the bigger draw. It shouldn't work like that. And for too long.
So I'll leave it there for now, Joe. I'll leave it there for now. But essentially, he's saying that the WBC has changed its rules, that it's written in writing in black and white, that it's a 55-45 split. My first issue with that is, no, it's not. I mean, it says up to 55-45 or up to 45% in the case of an interim titleist. And Dillian Whyte, yes, he's the interim titleist. Why? I'm not too sure, because Fury's been pretty active last few years and has been defending the WBC belt. But what is it, Joe, that makes you think that people are so up in arms about this? Like, why are people that upset about this particular split when they weren't, if memory serves me well, that upset when it was Joshua, name your opponent, Joshua Whyte, Joshua Wilder, Joshua Parker, Joshua, one of the more recent ones being the most recent, Alexander Usyk. Joe.
Here's the thing. You hear people saying that WBC is not following their own rules, but nobody has taken the time to read the rule. And I've repeated this and said it several times. It says up to 45%. It doesn't say guaranteed 45%. And it also says at the WBC's discretion under certain circumstances, the purse bid splits can be changed. They can determine it under the special circumstances. Do I think 80-20 is fair? No, I think Dillian Whyte should get more than 20%. But this whole thing about 45% is ridiculous. You know, and I hear people talk about what Dillian Whyte does for pay-per-view numbers. Let me ask you this. Is Andrew Ruiz a pay-per-view star?
I mean, in the United States, I do not believe he's been on pay-per-view.
Okay. I think he was on pay-per-view with Chris
Arreola. With Arreola, yeah, absolutely, yes. He's been on pay-per-view, yeah.
But is he a pay-per-view star?
I have a very strict criteria, Joe, for what I consider a star. So,
because everyone's talking about what Dillian Whyte does for pay-per-view numbers, and I respect what he's done. I have no problem with that. But here's the thing: is Andrew Ruiz a pay-per-view star? Yes or no?
I would say no.
I would say emphatically no, right?
Yeah, I would say.
What is the record? What is the record in the UK for the highest pay-per-view event ever? What sold the most pay-per-view buys in the UK for boxing, I should say?
Well, thanks to you, Joe, I know the answer to this, and the answer is Joshua Ruiz 2, or should I say Ruiz Joshua 2?
Joshua Ruiz 2.
Battle of the Dooms.
So, would you say that Vladimir Klitschko is a bigger star, a more well-known fighter, more popular fighter worldwide than Andrew Ruiz?
100%.
So how did Joshua Ruiz 2 do more pay-per-view buys than Joshua Klitschko? Because again, and I hate saying this, and I'm going to sound like a hypocrite, because I hate this phrase that Max Kellerman used to always use, because when he used it in the situation he would use it, I did not think it was applicable. He'd be watching a fight and he'd be like, who's winning the story of the fight? And I'd be like, no. It's a 10-point fucking must system. There's no story here. You score the rounds, 10-point must system. That's it. But where the story of a fight comes into play here is for an event. Everyone likes to talk about what has this guy done? But I've always said you put two people together that have a history, or you put two people together under certain circumstances, right? And that's the story of the fight. So when you sell a pay-per-view, you're not always looking at what this guy did in the past, what that guy did in the past. Sometimes you just put two guys together in that specific event, regardless of what the other guy did or what you did, that specific event just booms. Like Floyd Mayweather, Oscar De La Hoya. Before that, Floyd Mayweather, he did what? 350,000 pay-per-view buys with a Toro Gotti, right? Then he goes, so if De La Hoya was to say, or everyone was to say, well, Floyd Mayweather brings nothing to the table here, but look what that event did. So again, because there was a story to that fight, just like with Ruiz Joshua, there was a story to that fight. Can Joshua get his redemption? Is Ruiz a one-hit wonder, right? So it's people always want to bring up what this guy did for pay-per-view buys. It's not always about that. Again, it's the story of the fight in terms of selling a pay-per-view. So in that instance, I agree with that. So I have all the respect in the world for Dillian Whyte. But the whole thing about the WBC not following its rules, and I said this before, ever since that Gianfranco Raccichetti sued them back in 2004,
yep,
they went and revamped all them rules at our discretion.
Up to
we can determine this subject to change.
It's at the discretion of the WBC.
And they've put these fail-safe caveats in all their rules, just like it says for mandatory challengers, right? Up to our discretion to determine who will be the mandatory challenger. It does not. It even says in their rules, just because you're ranked number 1, it does not mean you're the mandatory challenger. That's why you had a guy like Dominic Breazeale, who's ranked number 5, become a mandatory challenger to Deontay Wilder, right?
Well, yeah,
and it also says too, they can enforce as many. Just because you win an eliminator, They can have you fight as many eliminators as they want. So again, this rule is not set in stone. It's up to. It's not guaranteed 45%. You know, and if Dillian Whyte is going to start these negotiations at 10 million, if that's the starting point, then what does he want to end up at? Right? So the best case scenario for Dillian Whyte would be to have Eddie Hearn win the purse bids and let him pay him. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, when Eddie Hearn made an offer to Dillian Whyte to fight for the heavyweight championship the first time against Joshua, he only offered him $5 million, right? So why did he only offer him $5 million? Eddie Hearn is notorious for lowballing opponents, right? Of his A-side fighters, right? He's notorious for doing that. So again, I think Dillian Whyte should get more than 20%. Don't get me wrong. I think he should get at least 30%, in my opinion. But don't start at 45%, or don't lock yourself in at 45% and have the starting point be at 10 million, right?
Yeah, look,
now,
I go ahead, Joe.
Now, if the ending point is 10 million, that's great. It's 5.5 million enough? I think he should get probably 7 or 8, in my opinion. I think he should get 30% of the pay-per-view revenue. That's just my opinion. I do think he's being lowballed at 80-20, but there's got to be a happy medium here. You can't just sit there and say he deserves 45. Like Abe is what's his name? Adeo Oladipo. He's way off there because he did not read the rules.
No,
he did not read the rules.
The rule does not say 55-45. It says up to 55-45. But you brought up a couple things, Joe, that I wanted to talk about. One of the first ones is, yes, Dillian Whyte was in the number one position, but as any more than casual observer of the sport will know, number one contender is not mandatory. In fact, oftentimes number one contenders have to face off against the number 2 or number 3 or number 4 to get into a mandatory position. So I've often heard, he's been mandatory for 1,000 days.
He's never been made the mandatory challenger ever.
He wasn't made the mandatory challenger. And if you remember, I've got it up here. I'm going to full screen it so everyone can see it. Back in April 25th, 2018, the WBC ordered a Dillian Whyte, Luis Ortiz eliminator. At the time, Dillian Whyte was number one. All right, the purse bid was set for May 25th in Mexico City, and the purse split at that time was supposed to be 50-50. You know who refused that fight, Joe?
Dillian Whyte.
Dillian Whyte, which is one of the reasons he wasn't made mandatory. So that's number one. And I want to make this last point, Joe, and then kicking it right back to you. The point that I'm going to make is this. 80-20 split sounds crazy, right? Well, let's assume, and I'm just going to make the numbers really easy for people here, that this fight is worth $25 million. Right now, we're still battling with the COVID-19. We'll get into some of that later. The British Boxing Board of Control has said that fights won't take place in the new year in England, which makes it a highly volatile situation in terms of putting together fights and getting the biggest numbers possible together for a UK fight. But let's say this is a $25 million fight. Well, I'm assuming that Tyson Fury is not going to want to make much less than he's been making as part of his ESPN deal, which is approximately $20 million. And it was reported that Dillian Whyte made about $5 million to face Povetkin. In that case, it was a 50-50 fight because he had a rematch clause and was coming off of a loss. So in that scenario, 80% is $20 million, 20% is $5 million, $25 million fight. And in that case, if we go to a pay-per-view scenario, and we can get into the business of that later, Joe, in terms of how that might work in a DAZN deal, You'd assume that they'd make extra money off the back end on the pay-per-views. But 80% of $25 million is $20 million. And typically what the WBC has done, as the WBO has too, is they average out your last few fights when making a split determination. And in this case, I believe that's what it's done. And something else happened here that might have bit him in the ass. He reported his last purse at the WBC is 300,000 pounds. Well, was it 300,000 pounds, Joe, or was it more than that? I don't know. But when you report that to the WBC and then they end up using that in their calculation of a split, that might be not very advantageous for you. But Joe, go ahead.
Well, the thing about this too is everyone's talking about percentages and they're talking about Dillian Whyte being treated fairly. But has Joshua ever in his life given anyone 45%? Andrew Ruiz was champion, right? So you want to talk about interim champion getting 45%, right? Andrew Ruiz was champion, right? And reportedly he got 13 million and Joshua got 60 million, right? So what's 13% of that split going up against 60 million? One guy's getting 60 million as the challenger. One guy has not one interim title, 3 full titles, right? He's got 3 full titles, not an interim title. And he's getting probably roughly less than 20% if you were to break that down, right?
So you're saying 60 million to Joshua, Joe, you said?
60 million to Joshua. That's what they're reporting.
How much to Ruiz?
13.
Wow.
What's
13.
that? What's that? Like 17% for Ruiz? That's not even 20%, is it?
No. And by the way,
and this is a guy who has not an interim title, but 3 full titles. So you want to talk about fair, and then the argument's gonna be, well, Ruiz never did it, never sold. He's not this, he's not that. But Andrew Ruiz right now can say that he is part of the pay-per-view record in the UK. No other fight has sold more pay-per-view buys in the sport of boxing in the UK than Anthony Joshua, Andrew Ruiz too. Think about that. So the argument about what has Andrew Ruiz done, what's this? Again, it's the story of the fight. Does it matter? You have to look at the situation, the circumstances, and the history between the two fighters. Same thing. I used to say this about Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua. Well, Anthony, what has Wilder ever done? What that fight would have been huge, regardless of, just like Ruiz, Joshua 2 was huge in the UK pay-per-view buys wise. That fight would have been huge too. It didn't matter what Wilder did. It matters when you put the two people together. Everyone was talking about that fight. It was a can't miss. It didn't matter what Deontay Wilder did. If Anthony Joshua fought Deontay Wilder, that would have been the Manny Pacquiao Floyd Mayweather of boxing in the UK. That would have been insane. It would have been insane.
Yeah,
nothing would have competed with that. So it doesn't matter what Deontay Wilder sold. Doesn't matter what Dillian Whyte sold. Doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter what Ruiz sold, because again, that story of that fight is Ruiz a one-hit wonder, and can Joshua redeem himself? People wanted to see.
No, absolutely. And like I said, I don't really recall this amount of outrage when Matchroom Boxing, Eddie Hearn, at the time they were promoting the, by the way, 3-belt heavyweight world champion at the time, 4 if you count the IBO, in Anthony Joshua, offering essentially less than 20% to Dillian Whyte, who, by the way, turned it down. At the time, Joshua was making like 30 to 35 million a fight. So you heard me break it down if it's a $25 million fight. Well, if it's a $40 million fight and you're offering a guy $5 million, that's less than 20%. don't recall people complaining this much about it. People say, "Oh well, Maestro, Dillian Whyte is a pay-per-view star in the UK. Fury's done terrible numbers on pay-per-view. He's not even been on pay-per-view." Well, there's a reason for that. He's been fighting under an ESPN top-ranked contract. His fights have been in the United States. They've been on BT Sport in England. And the fights have been taking place at like 5 a.m. in the morning. Dillian Whyte's fights have all been in UK time, whether it's in Gibraltar or happening in England itself. And they happen in regular UK primetime television slots. So, of course, if you're looking at it that way, those will do good numbers on UK TV. No arguments with that. But to say that Fury hasn't been doing that in the last 3 years, it's an obvious reason why. He's been fighting in the U.S. exclusively. Last thing I wanted to say, Joe, is Usyk got a pretty much the same amount of money to fight Anthony Joshua. But I guarantee you Anthony Joshua got more than $20 million to face Usyk in his last fight. Joe.
Once again, all you got to do is look at the history of splits, right? When Floyd Mayweather was the face of boxing, right? He was making 30 million, 33 million, and his opponents were making 1.5 million, 2 million, 3 million, right? These guys were getting, they weren't even getting 20%, right? And I'm not taking anything away from Dillian Whyte, don't get me wrong. But once again, if you look at Anthony Joshua, what he has made and what his opponents have made, the only guy that ever was on equal footing with Anthony Joshua was Vladimir Klitschko. Everyone else that he fought, he got, and again, Dillian Whyte got offered $5 million by Eddie Hearn, and then he turns around. So Dillian Whyte is such a superstar in the UK. He's such a pay-per-view star in the UK. And back in 2019, pre-pandemic, when all this shit wasn't going on and it wasn't economic uncertainty in the world, he was offered $5 million and he turned it down. And then Eddie Hearn goes and pays Big Baby Miller $7 million. So Big Baby Miller was nowhere near as popular as Dillian Whyte, but the fight was in New York, of course, and more people know Big Baby Miller in New York. But once again, if Anthony Joshua fought Dillian Whyte in the UK, that would have been a much bigger fight than Anthony Joshua versus Big Baby Miller in New York, no? So why was Dillian Whyte only offered $5 million for that fight? And then they turn around and give Big Baby Miller $7 million. Why did Eddie Hearn do that? Why was it okay for Eddie Hearn to lowball Dillian Whyte? But now it's a different story. This whole where I'm not following along here, and what really makes me question this whole situation is the starting point being at 10 million. So that means they want to go up from 10, right?
100%.
That throws me for a loop. And this whole thing about holding strong to 45%.
It makes no sense. And at the end of the day, if you're Fury, what number should you start your negotiation at? Well, let me guess. 55, 45, right? That's where you're going to start a negotiation as a businessman. No, you're going to start, especially if you have a strong position, you've got strong leverage, you're going to start with the biggest number you can get or that you think you can get. And again, when you break it down into the numbers of the fight and you think about what Fury's been making his last few fights, roughly $20 million a fight, I believe even more than that in a couple of them. Well, if this is a $25 million fight, then that's $20 million to Fury, $5 million to Whyte, with an option for an upside off pay-per-view. And people, well, if it's on the zone, man, so how could it possibly be on pay-per-view? Well, the price point for DAZN right now is pretty much equivalent to what ESPN Plus is in the United States. It's like probably about $6 with the conversion. And Eddie Hearn's made it clear that for the big events, they'll probably do a little purchase option much like we have it with ESPN Plus here in the United States. Joe.
Here's the thing, right? I don't think this will be on Sky, right? Because Eddie doesn't do business with Sky anymore, right? So it won't be on Sky pay-per-view, right? So Eddie's been talking about how DAZN may, for the right fights, have to do pay-per-views, right? Would this be DAZN's first pay-per-view? So then you have to ask yourself, okay, DAZN's never done a pay-per-view before. And all of a sudden, people who are subscribed to DAZN are used to paying their monthly fee and getting all these cards every month, right? So now you're going to all of a sudden turn around and just tell them, oh yeah, we're going to make you pay for this pay-per-view fight, which I would gladly buy. I would still buy it. But would there be any backlash? Would there be any backlash from DAZN subscribers?
So.
You think they would still buy it?
Real quick, I got to give a super chat to Sly. Apologies for everybody in the chat. It's going to be a little more difficult to highlight the comments today. I'm going to get it fixed for next time. We're trying something new here today. But Sly Tendencies came through with the $5 super chat. And he says, you two are the only ones on YouTube being real about this. Dillian ain't worth 10 at the start, especially when you just got iced by a washed Povetkin. Joe Habib.
Yeah, again, I want Dillian Whyte to get this fight. And if Fury does not fight Dillian Whyte, I will be upset. But Dillian Whyte did price himself out of a heavyweight title fight before. Okay? Is he going to do it again? Is he going to do it again? The old adage in boxing, the quickest way to get out of a fight, price yourself out of it. And that's not what I want to see happen here. But again, I am not for the 80-20. But Joshua gave Ruiz 17%. As Ruiz the champ, Ruiz was the champion.
Ruiz had 4 belts. If you
had 4 belts, and he got 17%. And mind you,
Usyk got about that amount too when he took him on.
And I don't want to hear who the fuck is Andrew Ruiz. Andrew Ruiz has the pay-per-view record right now with Anthony Joshua in the UK. So he's not a nobody. Right? And Tyson Fury, who was not known, was supposed to be a nobody in the United States. And we've been told for years how Deontay Wilder was a nobody. How the fuck did they do 850,000 pay-per-view buys, during a pandemic? Right? What was that second fight? That second fight was when the pandemic just started, right?
Yeah, and as Scant Rant says, AJ offered Wilder flat fee equivalent to 12.5%. And
again, Eddie Hearn
didn't have a problem with that.
Eddie Hearn is notorious for doing this to challengers to his A-side fighters or fighters he promotes. He's notorious for doing it. Wasn't there a featherweight unification fight that he proposed, and he was offering someone $1 million or some shit like that? And they were like, "No, I'm not going to take that fight." I forget what fight it was. It was a featherweight unification, and he offered someone $1 million.
Josh Warrington? I'm trying to think of who he's.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the fight it was, but I'll have to go back and take a look at it. But he's been notorious for lowballing people, right? So Deontay Wilder was a nobody, and Tyson Fury is a UK guy not known in the United States, and they did 850,000 pay-per-view buys. And what did the third fight do? Like 600 something, 650,000 pay-per-view buys?
Lennox was best. AJ offered White a ridiculous amount because AJ would have fought but wanted to go to USA for bigger things.
But that wasn't a bigger fighting. Big Baby Miller is not a bigger fight than fighting Dillian Whyte in the UK. It's just not.
The Big Baby Miller fight would not have been as big. And I'm telling you that.
It would not have grossed as much money.
Lennox, I'm telling you that honestly, and we agree on the most important thing. At Lennox was best. Let's get that clear. Dinging the bell just for that. But there's no way in hell the Big Baby Miller fight would have been as big as a rematch with White. And the only reason, to be honest, that the fight with Ruiz was even as big as it was because of the knockdowns and the upset. If AJ went in and blew out Ruiz, it would just been considered a nondescript, optional title defense, mismatch. But it was a much bigger fight than it was because of the turmoil of what happened. And as Joe said, Ruiz went into the rematch with 3 legit title belts and got way less than 20%. And I'm not even saying Whyte should get 20%. I'm just saying it's not as crazy as people out there kind of seem to want to make it out to be, especially when you consider Usyk just made less than that to take on AJ.
You know what's funny too? Dillian Whyte is sitting there talking all this trash about the WBC. And again, I think Dillian Whyte should be upset. I think Dillian Whyte has been treated poorly by the WBC. I think he should have gotten his mandatory title shot. I'm all on board with that. But you're sitting there and you're throwing obstacles in the way because they did make you the mandatory, but then you turned around and sued them to make sure that they go through with it after they finally did make you the mandatory. Now you're going through arbitration. You're dragging this thing out till March. You're prolonging it. And you're all the while you're taking legal action against WBC. Now it's going to arbitration. And you and Eddie Hearn have been trashing the WBC. Do you think that after all that's going on right now, they're going to go turn around and try to do you any favors now?
Well, I thought
and if the WBC is so dishonorable and they're so unfair, then fuck them. Why even fight for the title? There's fucking 4 other titles out there. If you want to count the IBO, there's 3 other major titles out there that you can fucking fight for.
Well, I remember I was asking someone, I was like, what? Because people are like, oh, well, Fury's a bitch. Fury's ducking, Maestro. How could you back this guy? Look, number one, I'm not backing Fury in this. I'm just laying out the reality of the situation. And no, he's not ducking. Was AJ ducking Dillian when he offered him $5 million in a fight where he was probably going to be paid $35 million, less than 20%? Was he ducking then?
First of all,
I don't understand that.
First of all, people are putting this on Fury, right? And Fury has there's no question. Fury has a history of pulling out of fights. Fury is a very unreliable guy when it comes to holding the mantle of being champion. He's not been the epitome of being a champion. I can vouch for that. I agree with that. Has he pulled out of fights? Yes. Is he his own worst enemy at times? Yes. Does he contradict himself? Yes. Does he troll? Yes. That's fine. But the facts of the matter here are everyone's talking like, oh, well, Tyson Fury is avoiding Whyte because of this offer. Tyson Fury doesn't make offers. His promoter is the one that's making the offer. So if Bob Arum because Bob Arum and Frank Warren have to get paid too, right? So they're not going to sit there and give somebody 45% because that's taking money. That's taking money off their table.
MTK's got to get paid too.
Yeah, so
management company.
The management companies, everyone's getting a piece. So Fury's not the one. Just like Eddie Hearn was sitting there saying, Deontay Wilder sent me an email. He's not the one that makes the offers. His promoters and managers are the ones that make the offers. So it's the same thing with Tyson Fury. Like Tyson Fury is not the one that's like saying this is 80-20. This Bob Arum saying it's 80-20. If I'm gonna put this fight up, it's gonna be 80-20. So that's on Bob Arum. It's not on Tyson Fury. First of all, this is how the money flow works. The promoter gets paid by the network. Then the promoter pays the fighter. The fighter doesn't say to another fighter, this is what I'm going to pay you. Now, a fighter can say yes or no to a split. That's true. But he's not the one that determines the split necessarily. It's the people who are the ones representing the fighters that determine the split. Why? Because they're negotiating not only in the fighter's best interest, but they're negotiating in their own best interest so they can get paid too. You think Bob Arum is going to leave money on the table for himself?
Well, Lennox was best says AJ offered Whyte a ridiculous amount because AJ would have fought but wanted to go to you. Oh, I said that one already. The other one he said that I actually wanted to get to, my fault, Lennox was best. You said that
you read that one.
He went over the splits in Saudi and Lennox
It was an 83-17 split.
70 million in the Ruiz match. Work it out yourself. Ruiz made about 15 million. Okay, so he made 15 million.
That's not true. That's not true. It was reported at 13.
But let's say it was 15 million. Okay. Let's say it was 15 million out of, what would that be, 85 million, right?
Yeah.
What would the percentage be? Let's look that up. I'm gonna do some quick math here. That's 17%.
17%.
If you want to round it up, it's 18%. Because it's 17.647%. So again, not quite getting that. And if Whyte again was offered 5 million and AJ was making about 35 million at the time, so let's call it 5 out of 40 million. I'm catching similar vibes here, Joe, because that means that Eddie Hearn offered Whyte 17.64%.
And
that's standard rate, I guess, for an AJ opponent, right?
Yeah,
0.6%.
AJ's not giving challenges 45%. And AJ, as the challenger, gave the champion, the unified champion with 4 belts, 17%. And I don't want to hear the argument, well, what has Andy Ruiz sold? He's never done this. He's never done that. He's one half of the record in the UK for boxing pay-per-views. He sold more boxing pay-per-views than
Dillian Whyte.
Than Klitschko. Klitschko is a Hall of Famer. Andy Ruiz will, with all due respect, I don't think he'll be a Hall of Famer when he retires, in my opinion. I'm not saying that in a disrespectful way, but I'm just being honest. Vladimir Klitschko is a national treasure in the sport of boxing. He's a legend. He's a Hall of Famer, right? So here's the thing. Now, Andrew Ruiz is nowhere even close to Vladimir Klitschko in status, but how did Joshua sell more pay-per-view buys with Andrew Ruiz than he did with Vladimir Klitschko? Why? Because it was the story of the fight. Because Joshua lost and because Ruiz won, being a 20-1 underdog, that's what interested people in that fight. No one was going to sit there and say, well, who the fuck is Andrew Ruiz? He never did anything on paper. No, he became the heavyweight champion of the world.
Look, I'm going to bring up my brother Lennox again. Lennox is back. Lennox said, and I'm going to bring up Lennox's quote here. I keep pulling up the old one. Let me fix that here real quick. Lennox has made clear that he was throwing out random numbers, and that his main point was that they were big paydays. So he says, I was throwing random numbers out. It was huge paydays. That was his point. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a huge payday, right? 13 million, 15 million. We'll give you the 15. But when you're saying that it's out of 85 million because Joshua got 70 million for that fight, the percentage is actually quite low. And that's Andy Ruiz going into a fight against the guy that he just knocked the fuck out and battered around the ring in the United States.
He got 17%.
And he got 17%. He went in there
17%.
He went in there with 3 belts, 4 if you count the IBO. He got 17%. Dillian Whyte is 1 fight removed from literally getting sparked out. Oxygen masks, EMTs, stretchers, in Eddie Hearn's backyard against Alexander Povetkin, and he's getting offered $5 million in a title fight as a title challenger who's never won a title and isn't rematching a guy who he just knocked out. You know, again, I'm not here playing legal for Tyson Fury, but Tyson's doing his job. His team's doing its job, more to the point. And Eddie Hearn's doing his job. talking a good game, backing up his guy and Dillian Whyte. I just tend to think, and as somebody who observes the sport, there is a level of vitriol and visceral reaction to Fury that is inconsistent with the reasonable ways in which people otherwise will look at a situation. We only need look at the comparisons we've given. Offers to Wilder to fight Joshua. Offers to Usyk to fight Joshua. Offers to Ruiz to fight Joshua. And offers to, yes, Dillian Whyte to fight Joshua. I never remember anybody saying, oh, wow, this guy's trying to duck this opponent. Like, look at these low ball offers. This is crazy that Dillian Whyte is only getting offered $5.5 million to fight Joshua. I didn't hear it, Joe. I just didn't.
Well, here's the thing. Dillian Whyte's purses have been all over the place. Over in the UK, when you hear reports of what fighters get paid, the numbers are varied. So you have to just take, like, if you're getting three numbers, I just take the three numbers and I try to come up with a happy medium and average them out or whatever. So they're saying that Dillian Whyte got $5 million against Povetkin, right? But once again, he was the A side. He's the UK guy, whatever. I get that. So of course he's gonna get a big chunk of that pie because Povetkin's getting a smaller piece. But when you're going in there with a bigger name than yourself, right? And you're trying to divvy up the pot, and you're claiming that you want 45%. I just never seen in the history of the sport when an A side has ever given a B side 45%. Joshua's never done it. And he went 50-50 with Klitschko because technically, there really wasn't an A side in that fight, right? Based off of Klitschko's reputation and who he was and what he's accomplished in the sport. You can argue that they were on equal footing at the time.
Yeah, I came across a comment on another channel. It was actually a channel of I'll actually just say the channel is Boxing Social, which I watch quite regularly. They're interviewing Dean White, who was, obviously speaking up for Dillian Whyte. But there was a comment that I found quite funny. It was by a guy named B Sample. He says, "Here we go. Dean Suleiman crying for his brother. It's perfectly fair. White got sparked twice and declared 300,000 pounds. If they average his purses, he wouldn't get 5%. Pricing himself out yet again, demanding 10 million. He's got the rolling laughing eyes emojis here. He's a free agent. Top Rank's initial offer was 5.5 million guaranteed, more than Usyk got against Joshua, and he won't even come to the table. Aha. There's some valid points there.
If you're saying I'm sitting down and my starting point is 10 million and I'm not budging from 45%, then you have to ask yourself, do you really want the fight?
But here, what's happened too, though?
This will be the second time, though, he'll price himself out of a fight. Not the first, but the second.
I want to end on this before we get to the last couple things to talk about, Joe. What's interesting to me, though, is that now none of this has even really mattered because the WBC made a ruling. They've kind of forced his hand. It's now an official 80-20 split. It's at the discretion of the WBC. Purse bids are set for January the 11th. If Eddie Hearn wins with whatever bid, White's going to get 20% of that. What negotiating play does he have now? Like what leverage does he have? He's got none.
He's not in a position of power. He's just not. He's not in a position of power. He has no leverage. And is 20% fair? No, it's not. Is the WBC doing a little get back against Dillian Whyte for what Dillian Whyte's done to him? Yeah. I mean, obviously, if I'm Dillian Whyte, I would not be happy with the WBC. But I'd be sitting there saying to myself, just like in certain situations when I'm at work or when I'm dealing with people, I have to bite my tongue sometimes. I have to play ball sometimes, even though I don't want to. I have to, right? Yeah. This is one of those situations where Dillian Whyte had to play ball. And what did he do? He didn't play ball. He made it tougher for himself by doing what he did, right? By taking this, by suing the WBC and ultimately having it go to arbitration, right? So now they can't even negotiate. They can't even start negotiating, right? Well, they can negotiate, but they really can't do anything until March, right? They really can't do anything until March because that's when the arbitration is going to be completed, right? So the purse bid starts what, January 11th?
Yeah.
So I guess if they could come to a deal, whoever wins the purse bids and they can come to a deal, then I guess the arbitration's won't be needed.
Look, here's the thing about the arbitration. And I've been involved in an arbitration, right? Arbitration happens independent of the body with which you have your dispute, sure. Right? So he's having his dispute with the WBC. He's like, this is not a fair process. I don't agree with this. We need somebody independent. I want to go to arbitration. But the WBC said, look, it's 80-20. We've called for a purse bid. If you refuse, then yeah, you refuse. We'll go to you with arbitration, but that's not going to stop what's happening here, because what's happening here is we've mandated this fight to take place. We've said you're entitled to 20%. If you refuse that, well, now Fury gets to go next man up, or I guess it's an optional defense, and he's talked himself out of yet another opportunity at a title. I just don't know where he goes. But if he doesn't accept the 20% at this point, what does he do? He sits on the bench waiting for arbitration. He fights who that's going to pay him more money than Fury?
So let me ask you this. So if they can't come to a deal.
Yep.
Right. And then the arbitrator decides, okay, well, we think based on what Dillian Whyte's made and based on what Fury's made, we think a fair compromise would be a 70-30 split, right?
Who says that though?
Say the arbitrator determines that.
Well, the thing is, I doubt the arbitration is going to take place before this purse bid.
No, say the purse bid comes. Eddie Hearn wins the purse bid.
Yeah.
The WBC is still going to hold strong to the 80-20.
Yes.
Okay, but say the arbitrator decides, well, we don't think 80-20 is fair. We think it should be 70-30. Will the arbitrator overrule the WBC?
Sounds like he might be able to.
Now is it WBC has the WBC just like they did in the situation with Wilder and Fury. That's how Wilder got his fight, because now I believe that the WBC has agreed
to arbitration
to go along with the arbitrator's decision in this case.
I think so. I think that generally the WBC has instituted an arbitration policy to mediate these situations, because they don't want to go to the courts.
So
the arbitration replaces the courts.
This could work out for Dillian Whyte, maybe, but he's not going to. He's not going to get what he wants. He wants 45.
He's not getting 45.
He's not getting 45. I don't think. So say the arbitrator gives him 30%.
Yeah.
So the WBC they'll go along with that because they've agreed to go along with what the arbitrator says, right? So it's 70-30, right? So at 70-30, if Dillian Whyte walks away, whose fault is it? Is it Fury's? Are people going to turn around and say, oh, well, he's being lowballed?
I mean, at 70-30, Fury would probably make less than he made in his last fight or last couple fights. And I guess he probably.
I think regardless of whatever the split is, Fury's going to make more. He's going to make less than he made in his last two fights, because it's not as big a fight as this fight's not as big as a fight as the two Wilder fights were.
Yeah, so I
So
think,
he's not gonna make as much anyways, regardless.
no, absolutely. My point was that I don't think that is going to lead to him wanting to not take the fight, because he's not going to make that much money fighting against many other people. Look, I just hope this fight happens. We'll see what happens.
And Scant Rants is 100% correct. He's 100% correct, because he says Wilder wasn't worth much, but has participated in a fight that's grossed more money than any fight AJ's ever been involved in. And he's true. He's correct. Because didn't that second fight with Fury, wasn't that the largest heavyweight gate in history?
Yeah, I think it was, in terms
live
of
gate.
Gross.
Gross.
Yeah.
Was that the highest gross live gate history?
Yes, not factoring for inflation, obviously, but in the total number, I believe it was.
Because people got to understand those fights in the UK, the pay-per-views are
wrong. Lennox is saying wrong, so we'll see. In Nevada, yes, that's true. In Nevada,
it was in Nevada. Okay,
yeah, in Nevada, because I was thinking also that Tyson Lewis was obviously in Memphis, and that was a bigger gate. So in Nevada.
Okay, in Nevada. Okay, thank you for the correction.
Not calculating for inflation, but it was still a big gate.
You know what the live gate was? You know what the live gate was for Klitschko versus Joshua?
It was less, even though it was in a stadium.
You know what it was though? It was in a 90,000 seat stadium. We know what the gross, the live gate gross for that fight was?
What, like 5 million pounds?
No, it was 13 million.
Oh, 13 million pounds. I should have guessed higher. I guessed way too low.
13 million, right? 13 million.
I should have guessed higher.
And Wilder Fury 2 was in front of what, 16,000 people? It grossed, the live gate was 27 million.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, you just got to. This is what people don't understand. When you're dealing with these UK prices, they're like 4 to 5 times cheaper than United States prices. The pay-per-views over there are what? What are they? 30? They're $30.
So they're about $30.
And they're 80 over here.
Usually 19.99 pounds to 24.99 pounds, or whatever, 95 or whatever. Once you do the conversion, it's about $30 at most. $30 at most. So it is what it is. Joe, I wanna transition quickly to two last things. I've debated a lot of people over the years in terms of the UFC being the model for boxing, and UFC kind of being where it's at now and taking over boxing. And count me among the few that call themselves boxing fans that are also happy with what Jake Paul has been doing. But I think Jake Paul is great, especially what he's doing as it relates to exposing the UFC. I did a video on it on my channel, Maestro Boxing. People can look for it later. And I do want to get your thoughts on it, Joe. I want to actually go to first. Actually, first what I'll do is this. I'll outline what happened. So Jake Paul took to social media on Saturday. It was actually my wife who pointed it out to me and said, look, I'll retire from boxing if Dana White does 3 things. 1, increases fighter pay from beyond $12,000 minimum for a fighter. 2, gives fighters 50% revenue sharing, which is essentially equivalent to what the NBA players get in NBA basketball. And 3, provide long-term healthcare coverage to UFC fighters. And I found it very, very interesting and also quite funny, Joe, that Dana White took to Instagram to respond to this. And, I find it very interesting that he did that. And I want to play some of the video for you, Joe. Again, this is straight off of his Instagram, so you don't got to be worried about the copyrights or anything like that. But I just want to get your response to this, Joe, and tell me what you think about Mr. Dana White and his views on Jake Paul. Here we go.
Jake, you never responded to the challenge. You publicly stated that I use cocaine. I do not. So I told you you could randomly cocaine test me for the next 10 years. I believe that you're a cheater, and I believe that you use steroids. So I want to randomly steroid test you for the next 2 years. And that thing that you came out with today, nobody on earth thinks that you really wrote that. You're too stupid. And for those of you that don't know, if you've ever watched one of his fights and you see when they do the stare down, the guy that's standing in the middle with the warlock nose and the big warlock wart on his face, apparently that's his manager. And that guy used to be an accountant for me. And let's just say this, he no longer works for me, and I think he's a scumbag. But if you two think that you can do it better than we do, we're doing this whole thing wrong. You could treat the fighters better than we do. Knock yourself out. Go start your own business. It's easy to do. Get the Warlock on it. The Warlock can get it started for you. What you and the Warlock should be focused on is your business. You're tanking. You can't sell pay-per-views. You're calling out Jorge Masvidal because he's a pay-per-view superstar. Nate Diaz.
All right, I don't need to go any further than that. My first takeaways, Joe, before I go to you real quick. Number one, he's telling on himself. He wants us to believe, I guess, that Jake Paul doesn't know what he's talking about, yet he owns up to the fact that the guy giving Jake Paul his information used to be a UFC accountant. Who's going to know more about UFC business than him? And he doesn't respond to any of the actual allegations or stipulations that Jake Paul put up. Instead, he flips it and makes it about cocaine and steroids. Joe, what are your thoughts on Jake Paul and what's going on with him kind of taking on the side of UFC fighters?
I have a lot of respect for Dana White in terms of his intelligence when it comes to business, how to, the way he marketed the UFC and how he made it such a big entity like it is right now. He's been a big part of that. But you have to question, how he treats the fighters, how the fighters are getting paid over there. And I will say this, every time fighter pay is brought up to him, whether it be from a reporter, he gets very testy, very angry, very combative about it. It hits a nerve, right? So if you know you're doing the right thing, right? Why does he get so irritated by that? Why is a YouTuber allowed to get under your skin so much? Because he's winning. Jake Paul is winning right now because he's not forcing you, but he's eliciting a response out of you, which is what he's trying to do. He's trying to get you to get angry and come back at him. When Jake Paul talks about him, he's giggling, he's laughing, he's very dismissive because he's trolling you. But you're getting angry about the whole thing. You're pissed off. So is there some truth to it? And you made a phenomenal point. Of course the accountant would know. He's writing the checks. He's doing the general ledger. He knows what's going on. So the argument can be, we're paying all of our fighters. Well, we're in boxing, just the top two guys on the card get paid, whatever. But if you look at it and you look at the guarantees some of these guys are getting, it's the same over there too. But besides McGregor and who else over there? John Jones was getting $500,000 guarantees. Daniel Cormier was getting $500,000.
John Jones doesn't want to fight right now because they wouldn't pay him $10 million to take on Ngannou in what would have been a multi-million-dollar pay-per-view. How do you not?
Besides Conor McGregor, who really got? Who else got paid over there? George St. Pierre got paid really well over there.
Who got paid more in wrestling? Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, on my channel, I encourage people to go over and check it out. I also showed an interview with Booker T, King Book, where he essentially talks about why he doesn't like the UFC because he knows that these guys don't get paid. Said even the top guys don't make anywhere close to what the top professional wrestlers make.
I mean, to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but Conor McGregor is the only guy that I know that's a UFC fighter that's ever been on the Forbes list. Am I wrong? I mean,
And he made the list because of boxing, because of the pay-per-view with Floyd.
Because of endorsements. So none of them guys are ever on the Forbes. So you can sit there and say what you want about boxing, but guys like Canelo, guys like Joshua, guys like Fury, guys like Wilder, even guys like Spence, Crawford's getting paid. There's a lot of guys in boxing getting paid, bro.
And there's a few guys that are getting career high paydays, as in bigger paydays in their entire career when they fight Jake Paul, Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley. I mean, I didn't even get to this. People asked me to play this when I was live, but I didn't have it set up, Joe, but I got it set up now. So I'll play a bit of this and then we can react to it. You can react to it first. This was Jake Paul's response. Again, this was over Instagram to what we just heard from none other than Dana White.
In MMA, steroid test me whenever the fuck you want. It is 2 weeks after my fight, and I am a fat bitch. I don't do steroids, and I take it as a compliment because there's no other excuse to me knocking out all of your champions than this kid does steroids. Look at me. Look at that. A fat bitch. If you steroid test me, then I want to steroid test every one of your fighters. Ooh, you want to do it though, will you?
I use cocaine.
I'm in St. Bart's, one of the nicest beaches in the world. You're ruining my vacation. We were on a yacht party last night, Meek Mill, Drake, everybody, Mike Tyson going crazy. You have been caught with cocaine and hookers every other week.
I use cocaine.
And you think that, like, with all the money that you have, like billionaire or some shit, that you would get some fucking Botox, because your forehead looks like a motherfucking GPS Google map, like all the lines in it and shit.
I use cocaine.
And you say Masvidal is a pay-per-view superstar. Let's go to his last Instagram post. 5,000 likes or 10,000 likes or some shit. Do you realize that my mom, Pam, gets more likes than your pay-per-view superstars? Men lie, women lie, Dana White lies, numbers don't. You want to talk shit about my manager, who is the CFO of your company that helped you sell it to Endeavor, $4 billion?
Guy that's standing in the middle, apparently that's his manager. And that guy used to be an accountant for me.
You're just a jealous, ugly fuck. You don't know what true happiness is. You're the definition of a fucking unhappy billionaire who thought that money was going to make their lives better. I feel bad for you.
I use cocaine.
Long story short, you address nothing that I said.
Yeah, as you said, he's addressed nothing. You can't.
You know what's funny? What's funny?
Go ahead, Joe.
You know what's funny? He tries to dismiss that guy off as just an accountant, but he was the CFO. You know what the CFO is?
Officer.
The CFO is like number 2.
Yeah, on the chief financial officer.
He was a number 2 guy over there, and you know, he was like your right-hand person, right? And you're just trying to dismiss him off as an accountant. That's very disingenuous.
And as he says,
I accepted your challenge. I said I would fight MMA. I said that I would retire from boxing, and you avoided all of that shit. Hold on.
Also, instant replay, there was a fucking UFO in the back of this video. Side note, but like fucking Joe Rogan, aliens, we're all fucked.
It shows that you are in a corner. You're a dog in a corner trying to fight to save his whole company and the embarrassment that I've put you through. Everybody sees it, and what you can't accept or love or appreciate is that I'm trying to change the sport forever, and you are one of the most selfish, capitalistic motherfuckers that I've ever seen, and everybody else needs you, Dana. I'm the only person that doesn't need you, and I don't give a fuck about you. But all these people, all your fighters, all of them, they can't say shit because you'll just bench them. You met your maker. I'm not going to stop. Welcome to the show, ladies. The bottom line, Dana, is that you won't add health care for your fighters because you don't give a fuck about them. And you're too much of a greedy bitch to pay your minimum fighter more than $12,000 for risking their lives, which is what a janitor makes. You need to pay them $50,000, Dana. Stop avoiding my points.
so yeah, Jake Paul, I don't really think Dana White should invest much more time in trying to go back and forth.
The fact that he's responding to him says it all, bro. Says it all.
100%. I found that entire thing very funny. Probably do a little bit more commentary on it tomorrow. Last thing I wanted to say, Joe, and we'll do probably a more extensive episode about this topic is, we've talked on Sucker Punch about the vaccine. People are vaccine hesitant. There are mandates around masks, around getting the vaccine to stay employed. Look, I'm double vaxxed, ladies and gentlemen. I took the vaccine last week. Actually, not even just last week, up until essentially yesterday when I had to go back to work. I was in bed for 4 days straight. Wasn't able to do the round table. Wasn't doing what I usually do, which is call up my man Joe to talk boxing. In bed, super amount of fever, aches and pains, super fatigued. Double vax, I got hit by the Delta variant, guys. I don't know what this vaccine did, but it didn't really seem to help me very much. If you could tell from my voice, but I'm still dealing with it right now.
D-Style too. He came out and said he got COVID too. He was sidelined for like a week or something like that.
Bro, it's nothing. It's no joke. It's no joke.
But I'll tell you one person who hasn't gotten sick. That's me. That's me. You know why? Because ever since I got the virus back in last November, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm vaccinated too, but I haven't had any issues because I have the natural immunity to the thing, and now you will have the natural immunity to it too. So, the natural immunity, I think, in my opinion, is better than the vaccine, as Joe Rogan had stated. And Sanjay Gupta questioned him on that, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So it's been a year, and I haven't gotten sick again since I had the antibodies and the natural immunity in my system.
Bro, I'm sitting here with you right now. Every now and again, I've been hitting my mute button to cough.
Yeah.
It literally feels like I've got a 20-pound, 20-kilogram plate on my chest.
Oh yeah. That's the worst part about it. If your chest feels so heavy, it feels so heavy and congested.
And Steven said it here. I had a friend of mine tell me, he's like, "Well, Maestro, you didn't go to the ER. You didn't die." I don't think I would have died if I didn't.
He wouldn't have died if he wasn't vaccinated, because I didn't die. I didn't die when I got it either.
I can't imagine it being much worse than it's been for me the last 4 days. In bed.
I didn't die when I got it. I didn't go to the hospital when I got it.
Waking up, Joe.
And I'm 52.
Multiple times a night, my wife is changing the sheets because they're soaking because of how much I've been sweating. Changing my clothes multiple times. I spoke to D-Style. Same thing with him. Double vaxxed, and this was the outcome. A lot of money has been spent on this vaccine. Apparently, the solution now, Joe, is for me to go out and get boosted, right? My answer, the vaccines didn't do it because you didn't get boosted. Well, I had the Delta variant. I didn't even have the Omicron. And look, I've got just as many questions about all of this as I had before I got sick.
Oh yeah,
just as many questions. So listen, I want to send everyone out over to my brother HCP, El Capitan D-Style Boxing. I'm going to drop the link in the chat, everybody. All right. I'm going to drop it for all of you. I'm going to drop it like it's hot. All right. It is Tuesday night. HCP is live. Let them know that Joe Habib and Maestro sent you out over there. This has been Sucker Punch. Joe, it's been a pleasure. I want to do
show, man. Great show
on your channel every now and again. We'll go back and forth, right?
Appreciate it, brother.
I want everybody who's over here, if you're not subscribed to my channel, head over to my channel, man. YouTube.com, okay, /Maestro A Boxing. Subscribe over there. I'm going to type it into the chat right now for you. All right. And I also want to send you out to my other channel where we do Sucker Punch, and that channel is called Pro Smoke. All right, Pro Smoke. Get a little bit heavier into the politics on that one. All right, so putting those two links in there. Please head out to them. We got Maestro A Boxing. We've got Pro Smoke. This is Joe Habib. Sly Tendencies hit us with one last super chat. I want to get to that before we get up out of here, Joe. Sly Tendencies, thank you so much for the chat, my brother, the super chat. Sly Tendencies says, very nice message from Mr. Sly Tendencies. He says, glad you're feeling better, Maestro. Great show, Joe. Thank you so much. That was from Sly Tendencies. Joe, that's it for Sucker Punch, right?
That's it, my friend.
All right, we're up out of here, guys. You guys take care.
Due to some violent content, parental discretion is advised.
I know you're gonna dig this.